What's happening, folks? Back with a film score reaction. And indeed, I'm going to react to a track, maybe two, from Orlando, a 1992 film. And you might remember about 7 months ago, I reacted to a song called Coming, sung by Jimmy Somerville, a Bronski beat, and composed by Jimmy along with David Motion, the score composer for Orlando, and Sally Potter, the film's director. But at that time, I hadn't actually seen the film, and thank you to Sofia who introduced me to this film and provided the soundtrack. And just as a quick synopsis, it's based on a Virginia Woolf novel of the same name. It's about a character named Orlando, played by Tilda Swinton in the film, who begins the story as a man, not as a woman pretending to be a man, but as a man, maybe an androgynous one, but a man, who is a member of the aristocracy and is in Elizabeth's court. It starts in the 16th century, and I believe upon Elizabeth's request that he never grow old, some supernatural phenomena occurs which makes that come to pass. And so as the decades and indeed centuries pass, Orlando is still alive, and you see shifting historical, political, and cultural mores and events through the eyes of Orlando. And of course, about halfway through the film, Orlando becomes a woman, and the novel, from what I understand, features a lot of asides from the omniscient narrator of the story. And the way they deal with that in the film is Tilda Swinton's character will just look right into the camera, breaking the fourth wall, and offer editorial commentary on what's transpiring. And about halfway through the film, she suddenly is in a woman's body, and she looks at the camera and says something like, Orlando, the same person, but now a woman. And for the rest of the story, she is a woman, which alters perceptions and expectations. So ultimately the story is about gender attitudes and expectations, but there's also continuity with the Orlando character. And as the centuries roll on, her/his legal status becomes more complicated because the records indicate, like, wait, you've been alive since the 16th century and you're listed as a man, but then in later centuries she's very clearly a woman. So yeah, it's a really interesting art film. I highly recommend it. But we're going to listen to a track called Pavane, which is, as I found out looking online, a dance that goes back at least to the early 16th century, essentially when the film starts. And it's a dance which has some different stylings. My understanding is that over time the dance would be articulated in some different ways. It became slower, but yes, it's a dance that has a very Renaissance type of feel. And I even considered reacting to a couple tunes from the soundtrack during the classical days, but because some of the tracks on the soundtrack, despite featuring older stylings, centuries old stylings, and classical instruments, they're also accompanied by like electronic keyboard, ambient pads, and so on. So I thought it might like muddy the concept of classical days a bit, but I'm here to react to them now. The first one I'm going to react to is Pavanne. So from series composer David Motion and Sally Potter, this is Pavane. Although I should note, when I looked on Wikipedia about this soundtrack, it suggests that this track is listed as anonymous, but it doesn't seem to indicate that on the actual soundtrack art, or the cover or the back, like the pamphlet. So I'm just going to list it as David Motion and Sally Potter, and as I said, it's called Pavane. yeah, I love that. It really does have a, late Middle Ages, early modern era type of sound. And again, Renaissance is more or less the bridge between those two larger eras. And as a historian, I often talk about historical periodization is more a retrospective analysis, and there are fuzzy borders between eras, and it depends even on how you define or where you're defining those transitions. But nevertheless, it does very much sound like a late Middle Ages, early Renaissance type of dance, or early modern period slash Renaissance type of dance. But again, I do think about halfway through, you hear this deep, smoky style bass line, or like pad bass, which I think is like electric keyboards. So it has a throwback sound, but with a bit of a movie score type of accompaniment. So yeah, again, that's why I decided to wait till I had finished Classical Days. But yes, it's a great soundtrack. I'm probably going to come back and react to one more from it in the same batch. So I will see you for that. Let me know what you think of this. Peace.